Back to the podcast. So, today we're going to take a deep dive into maximizing your training to build more muscle. So, whether you're in a bulk right now, you're in a gaming phase, trying to get huge, build muscle, or you're deep into a cut, working to maintain your strength while getting lean so you retain all your muscle, maximizing your time in the gym and optimizing your training should be a pretty high priority for you if you want to truly make the most progress you're capable of. So, in this episode, we're going to go over 5 things that will allow you to train harder, recover better, and then make more progress, of course. So, we'll start with the mindset side of training. Then, we'll get into the importance of consistency and progressive overload, and then how to manage training volume, how cardio, NEAT, and staying fit is important equally for gym performance. And then we'll touch on rep ranges, and lastly, fatigue management, which is quite the buzzword at the moment. So, starting off with the mindset side of things, which is, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked aspects of maximizing your training performance. If you want to make continuous progress, you got to detach emotionally from any specific training, diet, or structure, more specifically training methodology. Okay, so because people get stuck when they become too attached to one way of doing things. Like, I've been doing it this X way for X long. I've seen decent results. There's no chance I'm switching. And I've been guilty of this, to be honest. The people who make the most progress and look very different every 6 months, you see them like, whoa, what happened? Are constantly refining their approach. They're not jumping from program to program, but they're also not stubbornly sticking to something that's not working. Me personally, what I've done training wise and hasn't drastically changed over the past 2 years now, but my execution has. The small refinements in my approach, my understanding of training, my ability to apply the right stimulus at the right time are what have continuously allowed me to make progress and make progress at a much faster rate. So the key really is to approach training with an open mind. You're constantly evaluating what's working for yourself, but also what isn't. So you need to have flexibility in the process. That doesn't mean changing everything every few weeks by any means, but it does mean paying attention if something isn't yielding you results. Figure out why, adjust it, move forward. Now, first and foremost, you won't make any progress in the gym if you don't have this one thing: consistency. Doesn't matter how optimal your training plan is, if you're not consistently applying the same amount and high level of effort repeatedly over time, you're not going to get the results. Very simple. And when it comes to your time in the gym, one thing I want to drill down: progressive overload is king. But that doesn't just mean adding more weight to the bar every single week. It means progressing in a way that keeps your execution rock solid while gradually increasing the demand on your muscles. Way too many people chase heavier weights at the expense of proper form and range of motion, and that's just not progress. If you're shortening your reps, if you're changing your technique, if you're using a mechanical advantage, so you're using your body, not your muscles to move the weight or get those extra reps just to tick off a box, lift heavier, you're not actually getting stronger. You're just lifting more weight with worse form. So I like to think of it like I'm not a weightlifter per se, but I use weight as a tool to build muscle. I'm not there to move as much as I can from point A to B, say, like if I was a power lifter. My goal is to progress either my weight, reps, or improve my form every time I'm in the gym. And it's very important to track your training so you can actually apply this, because my progressions look like on isolations, maybe 2.5 pounds, maybe 1 pound. On a multi joint lift, it may look like 5 pounds, 10 pounds. So very small increments. And then when you do this consistently over time, keeping your form the same, executing at a high level, you will be maximizing your ability to build muscle. And a huge mistake people make that will throw this off is constantly switching exercises in and out because maybe they get bored, maybe they want to try something new. Whatever the reason is, the best way to get the most out of an exercise is to stick with it long enough to progress. If you're always changing movements, you'll never develop what are called neurological adaptations that take place when you first start doing exercise. The skill, the coordination necessary to then truly begin to overload the muscle. So stick to a core set of exercises, perfect them, and then push them hard over time, at least like 4, even 6 months to yield the best results. I made the best results personally when I stuck to the same training plan for 2 years. Granted, there was minor tweaks in exercises here and there. I use something called the 3 strike rule, where if I don't progress on something 3 times in a row, provided there wasn't any other factors at play, like a poor night's sleep or something like that. Then I switched that exercise out. But I stuck with the same training plan for that long, and I made the best progress I made in quite a while. So, applied progressive overload in small increments over a long period of time will yield the best results. Next, like I said, I want to talk about managing training volume for maximum muscle growth. More is not always better. When it comes to training volume, the right amount is the right amount that allows you to make measurable progress in strength and performance from session to session, which is why it's so important to track your training. If you're constantly training at high volumes, but not really seeing any progress in terms of strength, you're likely doing a little too much. And on the flip side, if you're making massive jumps in strength every week with perfect execution, you might not be doing enough. And this is where periodization and programming come into play, especially when adjusting for different phases, like a growth phase or a bulk when you're in a surplus, and a fat loss phase when you're in a deficit. The goal is not just to train hard, but to train smart. So you want to try to balance fatigue, recovery, and adaptation so you can make steady progress without creating too much fatigue, because fatigue is the enemy of hypertrophy. So in structuring training volume, the mistake I find most people make is hammering themselves with way too much work way too soon, especially when you start a diet. There's this mindset like, because you're dieting, maybe your routine is more on point, maybe you're now all of a sudden more motivated, you want to start ramping things up when it comes to your training. But when your energy availability is in the gutter, this will lead to excessive fatigue, fat loss stalls, and in the worst case, regression, and then muscle loss down the line. So you kind of want to think of training periodization. I like to think of it like landing a plane. So you come in steep at the start, and then you gradually level things out as you get closer to your goal. So in a bulk, this means starting with a manageable volume that allows for progressive overload without overreaching too early. So you may start with lower training volumes, focusing on progression, strength improvements week to week, and then as you move deeper into the phase, you may gradually increase your training volume. The key here, to match your recovery capacity and adapt. As you take in more calories, as you have more recovery capacity, which means you can do more work in the gym and be able to actually recover from it. Now, in a fat loss phase, you're on a cut, the approach is completely different. Since energy availability is now lower, you're taking in less food, you don't have the same ability to handle high training volumes. If you try to push the gas pedal too hard, you are going to accumulate excessive fatigue, which will not only reduce your strength, but also make it much harder to get lean. So this means when you're in a fat loss phase, keeping sessions as productive as possible without any junk volume. If you're training with proper intensity, you shouldn't need endless amounts of sets. Now, most people will progress best on 2 to 6, which is quite a wide range of sets per muscle group, per session, with a frequency of 2 to 3 times a week. So that's quite the wide range, but that's why it's super inter-individual. Now, if your training volume is too low, you're going to struggle to make progress. But if it's too high, you'll overreach and you're going to struggle to recover. So this is why when setting volume, always listen to your body. If you're constantly fatigued, you're not recovering, you're seeing your performance in the gym decline, your maximal recovery volume is too high. If you're progressing easily and not experiencing any real challenge, you finish your workouts, you're still feeling great, you might be undertraining. So the sweet spot is where you can progress session to session without accumulating unnecessary fatigue. Now, one of the biggest factors affecting training volume is exercise selection. Some exercises are just simply more fatiguing than others. Compound movements, like your squat, your deadlift, barbell rows potentially, RDLs, they create far more systemic fatigue than something like leg extensions or lateral raises, for example. So if you're stacking your training plan with a lot of high fatigue exercises, your recovery will take a hit, and not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something you have to be mindful of. And this is why exercise selection and periodization go hand in hand. So essentially the bottom line, more volume, not always better. The best approach is to start with less and add more as needed. Always prioritize progression, quality over quantity, and match your training to the phase you're in and your recovery capacity. This is how you make consistent progress in both muscle growth and fat loss phases without running yourself into the ground. Now, for as volume like landmark set points, you could start at 5, 6 sets per muscle group per week, which sounds very low. You hear that 10 to 20 all the time, but start a training block at 6 sets per week. See if you're able to progress week on week, provided how this will depend on how hard you're training, etc. Work your way up. And then when you find that ceiling, okay, you found that ceiling, and that's how you can run with it. So the next part to maximizing your training to build muscle doesn't have actually anything to do with your time in the gym, but instead your overall fitness. So keeping your body fat in check, maintaining an active lifestyle, also strategically implementing cardio when needed will improve your work capacity and allow you to train harder for longer. But there is a fine line with cardio. Too much cardio will negatively impact recovery. So it is somewhat of a balancing act. If you're extremely sedentary, adding in structured cardio will 1000% be beneficial. If your step count is consistently in a good spot, let's say 8 to 1,000 steps per day, you might not need as much direct cardio, but there are positive adaptations 100% that will take place with cardio that will have a carryover and a positive effect on your training in respect to our vascular network, your ability to recover in between sets, blood flow. So it is worth having some cardio in your plan, in my opinion. Now, rep ranges wise, this is quite, I don't know if I would call it controversial, but there's a lot of takes on it, at least from what I see. So, what we know for sure is that anywhere from 5 to 30 reps can be effective for hypertrophy, as long as you're training with enough effort. Nobody can argue that. So, if someone says this rep range is better than this rep range, it's coming down to minutia at that point, because we know 5 to 30 reps, it works, okay? So, however, the most important factor here is motor unit recruitment. Your body needs to engage the higher threshold motor units responsible for muscle growth. So within the final, let's say there isn't like a final 5 reps before failure in a set, those higher threshold motor units kick in. But it isn't always like as soon as you hit the final 5, it switches on. It's not like that. So it's around the final 5 reps of a set, and that's what's driving adaptations that lead to hypertrophy. So let's take a 5 rep set on the bench press as an example. Right from rep 1, we're already recruiting a high degree of motor units, making every single rep an effective hypertrophy stimulus. Now, if we compare that to a 30 rep set on the same bench press, like I said, the recruitment pattern won't work like an on and off switch. It's not like some at rep 25, suddenly the magic switch, and then all of a sudden muscle growth starts. But as fatigue accumulates throughout the set, motor unit recruitment progressively increases, and those final reps are where the most significant hypertrophy stimulus occurs. So with that in mind, what is the best rep range for muscle growth? Well, like we covered, they all work, but each comes with the trade-offs. There's an ongoing debate whether high rep sets, high rep ranges contribute to more fatigue, which could negatively impact training performance in the following sets. Some people argue that higher reps create more central and muscular fatigue, and some people claim the difference is minimal, if any, and there are well-educated people arguing on both sides. So I'm not. With that being said, fatigue is the enemy of hypertrophy. If it limits your ability to maintain tension or execute high quality reps, you're not maximizing muscle growth. So now with that in mind, how do you decide which rep range to use? The best approach, in my opinion, is to train in a variety of rep ranges, but for most of your exercises, I'd look to start with the lowest rep range possible while maintaining stability, keeping your joint integrity, and proper execution. If you experience joint pain or feel that certain rep range isn't giving you enough stimulus potentially, then you can adjust slightly higher. The goal is to maximize the stimulus while minimizing unnecessary fatigue. But at the end of the day, as long as you're pushing close to failure, every rep range from 5 to 30 reps can be effective. I like to do most of my sets between the 5 to 9 rep range. I find that rep range works really well for me. But for lateral raises, as an example, I prefer the 8 to 10 or 10 to 12. So I say try different rep ranges and see which ones work best for you. Some people thrive on those lower rep ranges. Some people thrive on the higher end of the rep ranges. I mean, right now, there's a ton of bodybuilders out there. There was just the show, the Tampa Pro, and I mean, they all train vastly different. They're all extremely jacked. So we all know they all work. So try it out, see which works best for you. So now you're consistent. You're now applying progressive overload. You're tracking your training. You're managing your training volume. Got some cardio in your plan or a step goal. You've picked what rep range works best, or you're training in a variety of rep ranges. Now, you won't be able to get to train at 100% intensity and get endlessly stronger. So there will come a point where fatigue starts to creep up and you will have to deload. So the best way to tell if you need a deload is first your training performance. So if you're no longer able to progress, strength is stagnant, maybe even going down a little, that is a good indicator that your overall level of fatigue throughout the day, your motivation to train, your mood, if you track your HRV, that could potentially be a good indicator, but not acutely. We want to look at chronic HRV. So when you get to that point, which if you set up your volume correctly, you're not training with insane high amounts of volume plus intensity, and intensity needs to be there, so insane amounts of volume, and you're training within your recovery capacity, this really shouldn't happen for at least 10 to 12 weeks of consistent progression. Then you get to that point, now you take 4 to 5 days out of the gym, or you can run what I call devolume sessions, which was my first bodybuilding coach, this was his approach, where you still go to the gym, but you do half the reps, half the amount of sets, and train 3 to 4 reps in reserve every set. So that is another way to set things up. Personally, comes down, I like to just take time out of the gym because I know if I go in there, is that really going to be 3 to 4 reps in reserve? It's going to be a little closer. So I just take my time out the gym, enjoy, kick up, do some things, get some shit done, and that's the way I like to run my deload. So that is a wrap on today's episode into maximizing your training to build muscle. Hopefully you're walking away with a much clearer understanding of how to structure your training for long-term consistent progress. If you want a free 30 ways in 30 days on how to level up your physique, your health, your performance, click the first link in the description. You'll get the opportunity to pick between 2 training plans. You'll get your nutrition set up for you. Everything's done for you in there, along with a ton of actionable steps and resources and guides. So check that out. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.